Hi, everyone, and welcome to Valley of Depth, a podcast from Archaea Media. Archaea builds media brands around the critical technologies shaping national security. We do this through Payload, which covers the space industry, Ignition, which covers nuclear energy, and Tectonic, focused on defense tech, through journalism, events, and original research. With Valley of Depth, we're going deeper, talking to founders, investors, policymakers, and military leaders who are building and shaping some of the most complex and consequential technologies in the world. In 2021, Astra was riding high. A publicly traded rocket company, a $2 billion valuation, and a bold promise to democratize access to space. By 2024, the dream had unraveled. Astra was delisted, Rocket 3 was retired after a string of failures, and the company was taken private for pennies on the dollar. Chris Kemp, Astra's founder and CEO, lived through every step of that rise and fall, and now he says it's not over. In today's episode, we sit down with Chris for a candid conversation about what went wrong, what he got right, and why he still believes Astra has a shot at redemption. We cover the failed launches, the SPAC, the near bankruptcy, and the bets he's now making with Rocket 4 and a mobile launch strategy. Before we dive into today's episode, a quick word about Payload Pro, our premium subscription for deep dive space industry insights, analysis on trends, and exclusive research you won't find anywhere else. Each week, we go beyond the headlines with original reporting, investor perspectives, and detailed financial models. Recent topics include SpaceX's projected 2025 financials, Kuiper's business economics, and the resurgence of satellite manufacturing. We also just published our first report, The Case for Space, a 50-page investor's guide to the space economy. If you're in the business of space or just want to understand it like an insider, subscribe now at pro.payloadspace.com. That's pro.payloadspace.com. So last time you were here with us was actually October 2022. So it's been a little bit. Tell us what happened. What's happened since then?
Well, 2022, we were public company. We were working really hard to digest Apollo Fusion, a company we'd acquired just a few months before that. We were watching all of the SPACs, including ours, crash in the stock market. That was creating a lot of stress for us. We were in the process of raising another big round of capital. Unfortunately, we were kind of locked out of the market because we ended up, our valuation went over $5 billion before the merger closed, and that triggered us as a large accelerated filer. And so our first round of financial statements, we thought we were filing on time, but they were actually late. So that kind of shut us out of public markets at a time when, frankly, public markets were not, they were risk off. Interest rates were going up. Our bank exploded. It was a very exciting year.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about the financing side in a little bit, but I do want to talk. Look, most of the people that listen to the show know you and know Astra quite well. I want to go back a little bit to, I know you're on Rocket 4 right now, but let's talk about Rocket 3.
Yeah.
So Rocket 3, you flew it, from my calculation, and correct me if I'm wrong, 7 different times. Now, 5 of those ultimately failed. Some of those fails were much worse than others, including in one case losing in NASA payloads. At the time, give us a little bit of your kind of thought process. Why did Astra keep flying? What made you keep going at the time?
So I think the way to look at that Rocket 3 campaign is like you look at Starship. Some of those were test flights. We didn't have customers on board. We weren't being paid to deliver payloads to orbit. 4 of them were. And so I think our track record was 2 of those 4 commercial flights where we were being paid to deliver customer payloads to orbit were successful, perfectly successful. 2, not. And, unfortunately, even though in one case it was extremely close, it was not, we didn't get the payload to orbit, and that doesn't count. And so, we unfortunately had a vehicle that not only was not as reliable as obviously our customers needed it to be, it was also too small. We would max out maybe at around 75 to 100 kilograms of capacity. We saw satellites that were largely 400 or 500 kilogram satellites dominating the roadmaps of all of our customers. And so the rocket, even if we had made it reliable, which would have taken energy and a lot of resources and time, we would have made a rocket that, frankly, didn't have product market fit reliable. And so I made the decision, it was a very difficult decision at the time, to, given the capital that we had, just cancel future launches, move all of our customers' manifests over to Rocket 4, put all of our resources on making Rocket 4, which is the fourth generation rocket, the best rocket it could be, the most reliable rocket it could be, because we were targeting 600 kilograms, and we could fly everything, and we would also benefit from the significant investment we made in our factory. So we invested about $100 million in a rocket factory, which is behind me here, to drive the cost of manufacturing down and make it so that we could make hundreds of rockets a year. And so that was kind of where we landed. Was we need to get a rocket that has product market fit, that could fly the vast majority of satellites, Kuiper satellites. A lot of our customers were making larger Earth observation satellites with larger apertures, synthetic aperture radar satellites. The whole market was moving to 500 kilograms. And so we needed to have a 500 kilogram class rocket to be competitive. And we needed to make it on this new rocket production line so we could drive the cost down, because there's product market fit in terms of the mass you're capable of delivering, and then there's a price elasticity demand curve. And if you look at our competitors like Rocket Lab, flying on order of a few hundred kilograms for now $12.5 million, there's clearly, if we could deliver 3 times that capacity at a fraction of that cost, I think there's a lot of folks that might want a direct flight to the orbit that they're seeking, and that for us meant really just putting all of our energy and focus in our 4th generation rocket.
Do you think, kind of looking back on the engineering approach, that it worked against you at the end?
No, I think that the only other better decision we could have made was, after reaching orbit, recognizing earlier that the rocket was too small and canceling, the manifest of 50 flights that we had on order as a public company. Would have been a very bad day. And just then, maybe a year earlier, after an orbital success, because you think about, we reached orbit on, I think, the second or third flight. We demonstrated orbital capability on the second flight, and then we reached orbit on the third flight. So we actually reached orbit, when you compare Astra to other rocket programs, quickly. We reached orbit from the inception of the company in just over 4 years. So that was several years faster than SpaceX. It's by far the fastest any team has ever built an orbital rocket. You've watched Europe, many European rocket companies, regardless of their resources, failed to achieve orbit. Many American companies like ABL exploded on the pad. Relativity failed on their first flight. There's been a long history of companies that fly once, fail, and they're out of business. So again, I get back to your original question. We had 4 commercial flights, 2 succeeded, 2 failed, but it didn't matter because the rocket was too small. So we basically had to turn our focus to a rocket that mattered to the market. And
yeah, so let's talk about leadership. So one, I'll say, getting to orbit that quickly, obviously, that is an achievement to note for sure. Now, just as CEO, you were at the helm of every major decision for the company. If you were to look back, where do you think you got it wrong?
Well, I think that in the early days, we built something very quickly, and when we looked at the rigor that went into how we applied our resources, it worked well to take the experience. We had experienced leaders. We had Chris Thompson, who co-founded SpaceX with Tom and Elon. He had so much experience with rockets. He made a lot of the right decisions about ways that we manufactured things. But the rigor in the engineering process, we didn't stop and do a full failure mode effects analysis across the entire vehicle system. We didn't analyze the test coverage and ensure that every potential subsystem had layers of test coverage. There's a balance between what you saw Blue Origin do, where they spend tens of billions of dollars in decades, and then they had a first orbital flight that was a success. If you spend decades and tens of billions of dollars, that's how NASA does it, right? And if you look at the NASA programs, if you cannot fail on your first flight, there is a way to do that, but it takes an enormous amount of capital and time. Now, you could also just throw a rocket together and launch it, and you would fail every single time. And so I think it's about Starship is experimenting with the just fail fast, learn fast approach, when you're hardware rich and you have the capital to do that, you can probably achieve success faster that way. And that's what we did. But that built a culture at Astra where we underinvested in the rigor around testing and systems engineering and failure mode analysis and redundancy in the systems. And so I think the pendulum swung the other direction. We hired a bunch of folks that were chief engineer of Blue Origin's New Shepard vehicle. We brought in a lot of that. And we spent a lot of time in the early phases of the Rocket 4 development, spending an enormous amount of time ensuring that every potential failure mode is investigated. We actually partnered with the DoD. We had the Space Force partnering with us very closely, looking at almost every engineering decision we're making. They were in our systems. They were attending our reviews. So as a partner, I think the pendulum is very much the other direction. So Rocket 4 is going to be incredibly reliable. Whether the first flight or the second flight is the first flight that demonstrates orbit, we'll see. But it is certainly going to be a system which is demonstrably much more reliable, and the levels of redundancy and the engineering effort that has gone into this vehicle is probably at least 20x what went into Rocket 3. Hundreds of millions of dollars has gone into this vehicle. And it will show, it'll show in everything we demonstrate. And we have a factory that can build hundreds of them per year. So, Astra is going to come back in a really interesting way because we have no debt. We've been running the business, basically on cash flow from operations from our satellite engine business. We shipped 42 satellite engines this last quarter. All of them have worked on orbit. Every single one of them, right? So we've been practicing this new rigor that we have in manufacturing because making a satellite engine and making a rocket engine is the same thing, right? You have electronics, you have high tolerance components, you have a supply chain, you have manufacturing execution, so the discipline that we have maintained in our satellite engine business, we don't have to relearn how to scale rocket production. We simply need to apply what we're already doing in our scaled satellite business to apply that to our rockets. And I think that's really key. We looked at potentially selling that business. I'm glad we didn't because it allowed us to really bake deeply into our culture and our values and our processes the rigor required to make every single thing that we ship as a company work every time. And that you're going to see that in the rockets as well.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna dig into all that in just a second. I do want to just kind of go back to the early days for just a few more minutes. So the company's no doubt been through a lot of ups and downs and a lot of challenging points. Did at any point, Chris, did you say to yourself, "Hey, maybe I'm not the one to continue leading this business"? Did you consider that at any point?
Yeah, I think that if I had ever given up on this business, it would be dead. Absolutely. Adam and I, as founders of this business, saved the business. And, we were the ones, we didn't sell a single share of stock the entire time the company was public. We put our own money in to fund payroll on, countless occasions. And we led the take private of Astra. If we had failed, we were, it has never been done before, right? No founder of a company has ever taken a company public, run as a public company, and while being the CEO and chairman and board member of the company, has ever led a take private and successfully without a private equity or a bankruptcy or something. So this has never been done before in the history of corporate America. And I think that tenacity is what will make us successful. We're never giving up. We're absolutely launching Rocket 4. And if it works the first time, great. The second time, great. There is nothing that will stop this team. And by the way, not only did Adam and I not give up on the company, we had over 100 people that came in every day reading all the news. And they literally have been working nights and weekends and making sure that they'd have the opportunity to return to Cape Canaveral and fly a rocket successfully.
What would you, if you could go back, would you do anything different financially? Would you have pursued the SPAC? Would you have made the decision to go public? Anything there that you feel like you could have, if you could have reworked, you would have?
There are a few things that I would come back to. My instincts were right on a few things. I brought in executives from other companies and I let them do it their way. And the board encouraged me to do that. I said, Chris, you brought in someone to run things, let them run things. Those are the people I should have fired earlier, and I should have trusted my own instincts, because a lot of the things that we got wrong were things that we were not doing before we went public, that we started doing because we brought in a bunch of quote unquote public company people. And we frankly, we lost the discipline and the rigor that we had as a private company. And I knew that if we could take the company private and we could, really get a small core team together, we have an incredible team here of engineers. We have an incredible facility that we built. If we could simply get the company back where it can focus on doing great engineering and delivering for our customers, all of our customers needed us to survive. And frankly, what saved this company was our customers and their need for the products we were building and their support of the company during, you read the press. While that was all happening, our customers were buying more products from us. While that was all happening publicly, our employees came into work every day and they worked harder than I've ever seen people work. So honestly, I think no other founders or CEO could have made that happen. And my only mistake was not trusting myself and my instincts when the things that were happening, and I should have made changes faster.
So early 2024. So talk about the take private. So the company goes public. $2 billion valuation. I think you said it traded up to $4 to $5 billion. Early 2024. Based on what's available publicly, you bought the company back for less than $15 million. How did that happen, and what were sort of the investor reactions?
Well, the first thing that we did was we recognized that the market. Look at all the companies. Rocket Lab, everybody, Planet, everyone's stocks were struggling. So everyone that went public in 2020, 21, 22, Virgin Galactic, look at where their stock is. It's all a fraction. Everybody was worried that maybe there will be no one that went public through a SPAC in space. And so we reached a point where the value of the stock just kept going lower and lower and lower and lower. And what were we going to do? So I met with the board and I said, look, we're a fully independent board to run a process. And you board members, you can fire me, you can sell the company, you can file for bankruptcy. I will support you in whatever you think is in the best interest of the shareholders of this company, whatever I can do. And in that vein, I had talked to some investors, and I had created a financial vehicle. This is all documented in 500 pages of securities filings. So I'm not telling you anything that isn't public, but I'm bringing it together. We said, here is some money so that we can pay off some lenders that were trying to use their power to force the company to bankruptcy. Shareholders would have gotten nothing. But we got some money to basically take the pressure off. The board hired new bankers and new lawyers to become fully independent from me and Adam. And I said, here's an offer to buy the company. And ultimately, as was well documented publicly, we raised as much as we could to fund the company through this debt instrument. And then there wasn't enough money in the end to make the board comfortable that the private company would be able to remain a going concern. So we had to drop the offer price so that more cash was available to the company, so that the board would allow us to proceed with the transaction, all again publicly documented. And so what we were able to do, and by the way, the board talked to dozens of potential acquirers. I won't go into details, but I personally pitched the company to many of our competitors, trying to get a better offer. I was all in, and I wanted what was ever in the best interest of shareholders to happen. And ultimately, our offer was the best offer that was available to the board, the only acceptable offer to the board. So they accepted it. And from that point, we were able to really, without very much cash at all, bootstrap the business. And we were able to renegotiate with a lot of our suppliers. We consolidated our operations from Sunnyvale back into Alameda. We kept ensuring payroll was met. We kept ensuring, we worked with the city of Alameda to renegotiate a rent agreement with them. Literally, it was the hardest thing that I've ever done, to basically keep the company in a position to deliver products for our customers while all this was happening. And that's what kept the company alive, is we kept manufacturing spacecraft engines this entire time.
Yeah. So this is interesting to me. So, the board ran a process, and ultimately, the offer that stood out was yours and Adam's. So you're telling so.
And by the way, this was at the point in the market where no one else was comfortable. Anyone could have bought the company, but this was at the lowest point of the market where this trend. So our offer was the only offer that the board felt that they could consummate. And frankly, that was at the lowest point of the market. So we took the company public when we were on the most risk on. All this capital was available to merge with private companies, like at the peak of the market. And then at the absolute bottom of the market, and we couldn't have timed it this way. We didn't know this because it's the market. You don't know what's the market. But we were able to take it private at a point where we were the only option.
What did you see that no one else decided, you know what, I'm going to put a better offer than $15 million, which is nothing, right, in the scheme of things. What did you see that others didn't? Like what were people missing from your perspective?
I think people, you don't know the commitment that the team had to this project. You didn't understand. I understood how important, how much the value of the mistakes we made and the learning would contribute to our success in Rocket 4. Rocket 1, they made a movie about Rocket 1 and Rocket 2, right? We knew those rockets would fly for 30 seconds. Those weren't orbital rockets. They had hunks of metal as upper stages. So those test flights, like the Starship test flights, were really, by the media, characterized as these really incredible failures. I look at Starship flights, and I am so impressed with SpaceX and what that team is doing and the progress that they're making with a vehicle that is incredibly impressive, right? So, but that wasn't the context of our early Rocket 3 flights. That hadn't happened yet, right? So we got really it's theatrical when a rocket explodes.
Yeah.
So that wasn't great for our stock price and things. So
let's talk about the current status of the company. You have Rocket 4 in development. You have a propulsion business. And how many employees do you have now?
We have about 135 employees today.
And what's the status of the facilities? Because we know when you guys went public and soon after, there were very, very large manufacturing facilities and development facilities.
It's active almost 24/7. Like we have teams here most nights and weekends working really hard in the campus that we have in Alameda. So the only facility we shut down was a Sunnyvale facility. It was a mistake. We shouldn't have opened because it split the team. We were manufacturing things here and then sending them there to test them and then having them come back here to get assembled. And it was, one of the mistakes we made was opening a facility when we thought we would be making other acquisitions and raising more capital in public markets to fund a satellite effort.
Right. So what is your philosophy now on rocket building? Because, I remember, Chris, when you and I first met, which was many years ago at a bank conference, and I remember you were sitting at your laptop. I went over and I was like, and I kind of asked you a very similar question, like, how do you think about rocket building? And you pulled up a paper. I don't remember who it's by, but basically what inspired you to do the rocket a day.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? Like, looking back on that philosophy, what do you think, and how has that changed?
I think the thing that we really learned was, this idea that 95% reliability was okay was wrong. Because if you take that internally and your teams internalize that, the engine can be 95% reliable, and then the avionics can be 95% reliable, and then the stage structure can be 95%, you end up with the overall system being like 0% reliable, or depending on, that's the way that works. And so the team has to believe that everything needs to work every time, right? And then the way you get to 99% reliability or 98 is like, look at the space shuttle. That was not 100% reliable. We lost several space shuttles. Falcon 9 rockets, you've seen a couple of pretty spectacular explosions. Rockets, even if you try to make it work every single time, you will still have variables that are very difficult to predict. A Starship exploded the other day. There's enough variables in a system with this complexity where everything matters, where you're going to lose one every now and then. no matter how hard you try. And so I think the thing that's changed is we really put an enormous amount of rigor into understanding the statistical probability of the reliability of every single subsystem. There's a much more methodical and disciplined approach to engineering and reviews of everything, test coverage. And unfortunately, it's meant you haven't seen us launch a rocket in a while, but it's been absolutely the right decision. We'll launch next summer, and the probability that flight is successful is very high. Not 100%, but very high. And the team's internally focusing on making that flight successful this time, not flying something that may or may not work.
Yep. So this is Rocket 4, to be clear.
That's exactly right.
So give us a quick overview on the specs of Rocket 4. How does it compare to 3? And I know you alluded to it earlier, but just give us a little bit more detail.
I think the biggest change is that it will have up to a ton of payload capacity, right? So, and it's designed for a 1-ton capacity. The first vehicles will come in at around 600 kilograms of capacity to a 500-kilometer orbit. We will have a 100 times more payload volume. So you can see the fairing is right behind me here. Off screen is the Rocket 3 fairing. But you can think of the satellite volume of Rocket 3 is like a microwave oven, whereas the satellite volume of a Rocket 4 is like a sub-zero refrigerator. And so we can fly almost every satellite that is in the market today. We look at the cost, about the same. So we've scaled the volume by 100x, the payload mass by 10x, and we've kept the price the same. And how we've done that is we've gone. Rocket 3 had 5 engines on the first stage. We've gone down to 2, with 1 engine on the upper stage. So we've gone from 6 engines to 3 engines, and so we've cut the number of engines in half, and that's significant. They're all turbopump-fed engines. So we've moved from the electric pump-fed engines in Rocket 3 to a completely new Astra first stage engine that we've been working on for years. It uses a very high-performance new combustion chamber that uses a new copper alloy developed by NASA. It's the largest 3D printed rocket engine chamber that I'm aware of. And we've designed it so that it can be manufactured on a lot of existing commercial 3D printers that can do metal printing. So there's been a lot of innovation there. We've basically taken everything that worked from Rocket 3. We've taken that heritage and we've applied it to Rocket 4. We've taken the things that we found from the data from Rocket 3 flights, we fixed those things, and then we've done a much more comprehensive, systematic, and rigorous engineering process where we've attempted to find every potential failure mode, and there's triply redundant sensors for all flight critical sensors. There's new software, there's new hardware redundancy. We can simulate everything. We've been flying fully simulated flights using our software stack for years, and that's new. We can simulate the entire end-to-end environment. It's totally mobile. So the mobility of our system, we can pack the entire spaceport into shipping containers, and we can transport it to a Walmart parking lot, and assuming Walmart and the FAA give us permission, which they wouldn't, to be clear, we could launch there. I don't need electricity or internet connectivity or water. Like, we literally can go to an austere launch location on an island somewhere, and we can just drop some shipping containers, and we can do an orbital launch in like a day. That's the ConOps. Is how can you have hundreds of spaceports in dozens of countries, and how do you have thousands of rockets, right? So our DoD contract, which we can talk about in a second, is to put drones in the rocket and then deliver them to the other side of the planet in 45 minutes. So being able to launch from anywhere to anywhere, anytime, is the thing that is different about Astra from any other rocket company. And with basically any amount of capital trying to do that in less than a decade is impossible, because no one's ever done that.
What is just going back to your cost point, what does that get you on a per kilogram basis?
It's about on par with SpaceX rideshare. So our goal is to be a little bit.
And by the way, from your perspective, what is that? Because
it's around 7,500 a kilogram.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, and I think what we want, if you're a commercial operator and you want to launch a constellation, or you want us to help support maintaining a constellation. We want to be able to go and do a direct orbital insertion for what you would otherwise have to wait for being dropped off at Sunsync in 2027 on SpaceX would cost.
Right. And at one point, you were buying propulsion from the likes of like a Firefly. Are you still doing that, or is the engines completely in-house?
Yeah, they stopped wanting to sell us anything. So we have IP and our own first stage engine that we've developed.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back to the model now. So are you focused now primarily on the DoD customer, on the government customer, or are you still thinking about a real commercial market? Now, obviously, there's a lot of different players at different price points, and 1,000 to 15,000 kilograms in terms of new rockets that are coming out. You have Starship coming online. What niche are you trying to kind of play in, and where do you see an actual commercial opportunity?
We look at the big players out there. Again, the scoreboard is SpaceX is obviously the vast majority of launches. I think they've done over 500 launches in the last decade, right? Then there's Rocket Lab, and they've done over 50. We've done 2 successful orbital launches. I believe Firefly has done 2 successful orbital launches. And I think Blue Origin has done 1 successful orbital launch. That's it, right? So what I'd like to do is have a factory that can make hundreds of rockets per year, and a rocket that we can manufacture like soda cans, occupy the we can launch anything, anytime, from anywhere market. And because that is uncontested, no one can do that. There are many other countries that have space programs that want to be able to launch their own satellites and have sovereign control over space access. We have an administration that would love to see American space technology and rocket technology be what the world uses to get to space. It is much easier to do that if you can put rockets in shipping containers and send them, via container ship, via train, via airplane. We can load these on C-17s. We can drop off some containers anywhere in the world if it's an ally, and we can do orbital launches from there. No one can do that. No one will be able to do that for a long time because you have to start from scratch with a design that allows you to do that. And I can tell you, like, making how old is Rocket Lab and SpaceX? Number 1 and 2.
And SpaceX is what, 25 years old, something
Yep.
like that. And 2002, I think, is when it was incorporated. Rocket Lab, I actually don't know the exact number. I would say like 10, 15 years.
I think it's like 23 years for SpaceX or something like that, maybe 18 years for Rocket Lab. We just turned 8. So I think, put it in perspective for a second, right? I mean, we got to orbit very quickly. We have the resources now to go and manufacture rockets at scale. We needed the discipline to do the hard work, the engineering work, to make sure that this is a reliable system, because now we're going to have a reliable system that we can manufacture at scale, that we can transport anywhere, and we're 10 times cheaper than Rocket Lab. So if there is any notion of price elasticity demand, like, also we can address the entire market, right? I checked my math here, but I believe that if you look at the entire manifest of Rocket Lab, they've never flown more than about 200 kilograms per launch. So that indicates that, if we can launch 600, that's 3 times the capacity at 1/3 of the price. That's almost 10x better economics. So Neutron better work. And also Starship is not mobile, and not Noah's relativity. So I think we fill a really important niche here where, we can talk about our defense contract, but I'm really excited about millions of drones and thousands of rockets in hundreds of locations being a key part of our national defense strategy.
Yep. Why do you think, so hear you on your point on Rocket Lab, why do you think the market is giving them what, I think it's like a $16 to $17 billion market cap right now?
I think space is really important. People understand they are number 2, right? And they have a working system. So again, like our focus is working system means you are worth a lot. An unreliable system, you saw what happened to us, right? So the rigor and the discipline to put a really well-engineered rocket on the pad that can be manufactured on a production line at scale is the hard thing. And there's a chicken and egg problem, right? I learned that you actually need the factory first, because every single manufacturing process, every weld like zip ties don't matter, but welds do, right? And the ability to turn a $25,000 coil of aluminum into 3 rockets is key, right? And that means every piece of equipment on our production line is part of the engineering process. And we have to characterize the quality of every single manufacturing step, because that repeatability is the key to reliability. So you can't prototype a rocket and then raise billions. You're going to redesign the rocket again. If your strategy is to raise a bunch of money, get to orbit, and then figure out how to scale your rocket, you'll fail, because you're redesigning the rocket, and your investors aren't going to expect that that's going to happen, right? So you basically have to make the factory investment so that you can design the rocket to be think about a Tesla Model 3. Super cool design. They have a gigapress. The entire aluminum structure of the car is stamped out of one. That's how we make our rockets. But if you don't have the gigapress, if you just have this concept of a Model 3 and you don't have the capital to build the factory, if you don't have a gigafactory, you don't have a Model 3. You have a PowerPoint presentation. So we have the rocket factory. Rocket 4 is made on this factory. But if I don't have the factory, I don't have a rocket. So I think that's the important, that's the big idea.
Yeah, talk to me about customer. We'll get to the DoD in a second, but talk to me about the customer trust, and I want you to talk to me about the launch side of the business and the propulsion side of the business, because I know that during the time the company was struggling, there were a lot of companies that had brought propulsion units that ultimately were left kind of scrambling to find replacements, and then I think the engine business took some reputational hit at the time. Let's maybe start there. Where does the engine business, it sounds like it's going well. Where does the engine business stand today? And how has it been on the customer kind of trust side?
Well, I think the engine business has helped us rebuild trust with customers. We have 100% of those engines that are on orbit are working. We have shipped, I think, over 75 engines now, maybe almost 100. I think it's almost 100 engines now. We've sold hundreds of engines. Customers keep buying more. So we test those engines here at our facilities and we ship them and they work on orbit. This is what's kept the company alive, is our reputation and the trust that we built with our customers. And every one of our commercial customers not only stuck with us, but they leaned in and they ordered more from us when things were hard financially. So people were worried about Astra financially for good reason, right? It came real close to not working out dozens of times. But because those customers knew that our product was a great product, they continued to support us every single right?
So you retained all those customers?
We retained every commercial customer, and we are still working through things with a few of the DoD customers because they never finished their designs.
Right.
And so we were not able to deliver things for customers that weren't able to finish telling us what they wanted. And so, but yeah, that's incredible, right? That they not only stuck with us, but they ordered more in the darkest, most challenging times of the company's, attempting to rise from the ashes. So, I think as the rocket, the DoD loves us. 100% of our DoD launches have been successful. NASA hates us. 100% of our NASA launches failed, right? So, but 100% of customers want the launches to work 100% of the time, and that we've taken that to heart. And so, as a founder, as a CEO, I had to talk to the customers when their payloads didn't make it, and it was painful because they worked hard on the satellites, and they, their businesses and their projects were relying on those things. Now, fortunately for NASA, the constellation only needed 2 out of 3 to work. Rocket Lab delivered the other 2. I was happy about that, right? Now, we have an opportunity to take all of that, bring it back into a new design, and few companies have that. How many companies have failed once and then failed? Like 100% of the other rocket companies. The only rocket companies that have worked are the ones that do not give up. SpaceX didn't give up. They launched, it failed. They launched, it failed. They launched, right?
What is the relationship with NASA now?
We have a contract with them, and I'd love to fly more satellites for NASA. And I want to prove to NASA that everything they fly with us is going to reach the orbit every time. But I think we're going to do some flights first for the DoD. The DoD's been all in, and I really appreciated their partnership and their support.
So last fall you mentioned targeting a $50 million Series B. On PitchBook, it shows some funding from undisclosed investors, but there haven't been obviously a lot of public details. You've said you've raised 80 million since going public, which includes about 65 million used for the buyout. Am I getting these numbers right? That's not, it feels like maybe there's a gap. Like where?
Yeah, I think the total cash that we've raised since the take private was 80. We actually have some investors that are looking at closing a pretty big round now at a very reasonable valuation. I haven't signed any term sheets yet because I want every investor that we partner with to understand that this is a long-term bet, right? This is a company that we're going to take what we've learned from making satellite engines. We're going to make other satellite components, and then we're going to make satellites, and then we're going to have a vertically integrated space tech, space systems company. And we're going to be unique because we can show up in any country that the U.S. wants to partner with, and we can help them put satellites up. No one else can do that, right? So I see an opportunity that is extremely large for Astra because we've always done mobile launches. Every launch we've ever done has been on an entire spaceport that we have transported to Kodiak or to Cape Canaveral. And people don't realize this, but we'd never been to the pad at Cape Canaveral. It was just, you didn't even have electricity. We went and we set up the entire thing at Cape Canaveral and we launched in 7 days. That's insane, right? They told us it would take a year or two. It took 7 days.
Right.
From arriving at the site to an orbital launch. It didn't work, but it was the same system that successfully delivered multiple orbital successes up in Kodiak.
So you are raising another round now? Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a great time to raise. We've seen Impulse, just raise $250 million at a $1.5 billion. There's a lot of money. Our customers are raising a lot of money, and our customers want more from us. They want to order hundreds of satellite engines from us. They want launches from us. So we're raising because there's a massive amount of demand that we need to staff up to meet because everybody else has raised money.
Are you so you said you raised 80 million since the take private, right? So post the close of the take private, it's 80 million.
Yeah, the Series A we raised 80 million, and we'll probably raise at least 100 now. 50 was what we were talking to before. We've now got interest well in excess of that at this point.
Okay, got it. And is that new investors, previous investors?
I think it'll be mostly some new investors, but it'll be a lot of there'll be existing investors that do their pro rata and participate as well.
And what do you think? What has compelled those investors? Forget about Astra's history for a second. Forget about Astra's history. Let's wipe that slate clean. You have a company, you have a facility, you're building these rockets. In general, it's pretty hard to raise for a rocket company, period. Mm-hmm. Right? Forget about what the model is and strategy is. It's just there's a lot of investors who are quick to say, well, all these companies exist and there's a Starship and all that stuff. How are you convincing those investors to say, okay, this makes sense? Is it purely based on the DoD sort of ConOps example that you've been giving, or is it something bigger than that?
Yeah, let me just go back to day one. I never wanted to build something that companies didn't need, right? So I looked at what SpaceX was doing and I said, there is no way we're going to go build a rocket that is going to directly compete with SpaceX. I know Elon. I respect, not only him, but the teams he builds and the energy that they put into what they're doing. So the question that Adam and I asked was, is there something that is completely complementary to what they're doing over at SpaceX, right? And let's double down on that. Let's never give up on that vision, right? And the only thing we got wrong was we could have made a larger rocket that fits in a shipping container on day one. It would have needed turbo pumps. And so we made the calculation that let's make the biggest rocket that we can use electric engines to propel at a certain price point. And maybe we wouldn't be here if we had attempted to do 2 turbo pump fed engine programs in a Series A for $10 million, whatever we raised in our Series A originally. Maybe that was a bridge too far, and the electric engines were the way that we actually built the company to this stage. Who knows? But the point is, today, what we have is a team that has persevered and has worked harder than I've seen any other team work, with the potential exception of SpaceX, and because those guys are incredibly hardcore, and we live in San Francisco next to a city, and they're in the middle of nowhere, so our employees have something to do when they leave here. So there's that. But oh my God, like this is a company that is not going to give up, that is going to succeed. And when it succeeds, we're going to have a vehicle which is 10 times cheaper than an already successful company, now valued at $16 billion.
Yep.
So it's going to be fine.
You mentioned earlier you're going to do 50 million in revenue this year. Is that still tracking?
Still tracking, yeah.
And then how much of that is milestones on Rocket 4 versus like the propulsion business?
It's 80% the propulsion stuff and about 20% Rocket 4 milestones.
Got it. You've mentioned, Chris, the team a number of times. Is there anyone on this team you want to call out that like, look, has either been with you for a while or has been just like a secret sauce? Like anyone?
I have to mention Katie. She's incredible.
Katie's great. I love Katie. But like, let's talk the technical team. Like on the technical team, like
I think honestly, like what I'll come back to is Adam is honestly the best co-founder I could ever have. I mean, he's brilliant. He did his PhD, his master's, and his undergrad in rocket engines at MIT. So, his technical acumen and his commitment is absolutely unwavering. And so we as a founder team complement each other in ways that are, just I couldn't have imagined possible. And I've started a few companies before this. And so like I really have an enormous respect for Adam. And Adam has never wavered, like not once. There's never been a point where we looked at each other and didn't say we're all in on this. Okay. And then from there, a lot of the original, like the lead of our propulsion organization, Mike Judson, he built the first stage engine for our previous rocket. All of those engines worked, right? The only one that didn't work was when the rocket separated and we had a fuel escape from the QD, and it caused a small explosion to cause a piece of metal to sever the one of the electrical lines to one of those engines, and it shut down as you'd expect it to. And the rocket hovered, went sideways, and then it returned, on its course to orbit, and was terminated by the range safety officer, like Rocket Lab's first flight, by accident, right? Otherwise, every piece of data suggests that we would have made orbit on that flight. And that was the first flight as a public company that we made.
So the flight, the infamous flight where the rocket was traveling sideways, you would have made orbit if the range safety officer did not terminate the flight?
Absolutely. Every piece of data from that flight and from every flight subsequent to that flight indicates we would have. We thought maybe we wouldn't have had the battery capacity with the 4 remaining engines to do it, but subsequent flights indicated we did. And so wouldn't have that been incredible for that rocket to bust through the gate, fly sideways, and then make orbit? But the range safety officer loaded the trajectory of a previous launch into their computer, thought we were flying off course, and that's why everybody was so shocked. I don't know if you were covering that launch, but we didn't know what happened. And it's because somebody hit a big red button somewhere. Peter, I think that same thing happened with their first launch. So I feel that pain.
Chris, I want to ask a few personal questions. On your leadership style, like how has that evolved over the last few years? How would you describe how that's evolved?
I think that I was too tolerant of people that I knew were not the right people, and they weren't performing. And I'm a lot less tolerant of that, right? So we've made a lot of changes, and we've really, frankly, elevated a lot of people based on their raw intellectual horsepower and their commitment, not they were at SpaceX or they were at Blue Origin or whatever. Like I think it is the people that frankly are the most committed that are here today. So if we were to raise a whole lot of money, I've told the team, we're not going to hire hundreds of people. We're going to take every person that we I personally recruit everybody that we hire. No one comes in this door that I haven't interviewed, and it's because that's the thing that we didn't do. We brought in people that just frankly the culture wasn't cohesive because we tried to scale too fast. Yeah, and but back to your question, there are dozens of people. I was looking through the manifest of employees that have been here since the very beginning. They never gave up, and they didn't give up an atom. From a technical leadership, and they didn't give up me because they knew I wasn't going to give up. And we would always raise the money. We would always overcome whatever challenges were before us. They trusted us with that, and our investors did too. Scott Stanford, our Series A investor, didn't sell a single share of stock when we were public, and he's still on our board, the original Series A investor. Mm-hmm. So imagine that continuity, that commitment from a venture investor. I literally just helped write a memo to his LPs about why they should keep the fund because Astra is still going to be an incredible, outlier return for that fund. That doesn't happen. Like what VC keeps a fund alive so that they can actually see the return the next time we have a liquidity event?
What's been the hardest moment for you personally?
I think just, this idea that if this didn't work out, it was over. I mean, company would be bankrupt, but we would be sued into oblivion by a giant class action lawsuit of shareholders pissed off that we as individuals had the audacity to try to do something that's never been done before, to take a company we were helping run private, right? Knowing that on the other side of failure was total personal financial ruin. And the effect that had on our families, our kids, watching us just absolutely take all of that and just lead the team through it, right? Without that cause us to waver.
And you've taken quite a bit of criticism over the years. What do you think? What's the most unfair thing that people have said about you?
I don't know. I don't really like to think about whether I know I know what we're doing here. I know that the people around me understand who I am. The thing that I was a little frustrated by was the idea that there's all this competition. This movie was all about, frankly, every time I would say something funny, that was the storyline, right? So like there was this idea that
the movie being the HBO,
exactly.
the HBO movie.
Yeah, so I think there's this narrative right out there, and for better or for worse, that's not me. That's kind of like if you were to take 7 years of video and edit together a caricature, like a funhouse mirror of me. I think it's very entertaining, and I'm like, wow, that's ridiculous, I guess. So, but anyway, I mean, perhaps it's like a misdirection if people think that that's what they're up against. Great.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to put you in a little what do you call it? Time machine. All right. Your current Chris is traveling back to 2016 Chris as he's starting Astra. Like, what would you tell him?
Well, I mean, our Wi-Fi password was daily space delivery 2020 in 2016. And so like clearly launching a rocket every day is harder than Adam and I thought it would be, right? And I think the chasm between doing it once and doing it every day, and that's why SpaceX is so impressive to me, right? That they are the only space company that has ever crossed that chasm. Like, and that's, I think that's the takeaway. And so like, that's what my sights are on, something that complements SpaceX, that operates with that level of repeatability and reliability and scale. And that's why that team, I will always respect Elon and everybody he over the last 20 years has brought into that shop. It's hard. Like, so making a rocket work once, reaching orbit is hard. Doing it repeatedly at scale is 100 times harder and requires 100 times more capital, is my observation.
What makes you, at the end of the day, not only believe in this, but want to keep going? You have a lot of you have a mix of people. You have believers. You have people who are haters. You have people who don't. When you're building like this in public, there's a lot of things that people say about you and I don't mean just you, but anyone, but like particularly given sort of the drama behind the company.
Yeah.
What makes you want to keep doing this? Is it to prove everyone wrong?
I don't honestly look at that stuff. I don't, quote unquote, read the tabloids. I will post some things and there will be some things. I don't pay attention to it. I don't care what people say. We're going to do it, and it needs to be done. Like, you look at the end game here, and if we can make a system that we can put in dozens of different countries, in hundreds of different, I want hundreds of spaceports. I just want a daily launch. Like we're the only company that is positioned to democratize American space technology. Like the aviation industry in last century began with companies that were able to fly airplanes and land them on dirt airstrips. The dirt spaceport is perfect for Astra. So like I think I love what the vision of Starbase is everywhere, but it's going to start you don't start with an international airport. You start with a dirt airstrip. And so I actually think that we've built the product that's going to allow America to lead in space for the next century. And I know how expensive and hard it is, and there's no one else working on it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're to give a blank check to anybody to start competing with us today, best case, they have a system like ours in a decade.
What do you think about going public now that you've been a public company? Like, when would be the right time?
Well, I think that what I learned is doing a manufacturing company in America as a public company is hard, right? Because
and by the way, part of the reason why I'm asking is like when you're thrusted into the public eye, especially in the case of a stock in a public company where you have retail investors, and there's going to be retail investors who listen to this episode who are going to comment about how they lost all their money on their stock. Like that's what's going to happen, right? And there's a lot of love and hate. When you're doing great, they all love you, right? You're almost you can become a meme. And when you're not doing great, then people say a lot of mean things, to say the least. Yeah. Like what and I know Elon obviously very specifically has said, it's very clear that he would avoid going public like the plague, despite obviously having Tesla as a public company, and it's part of the reason why SpaceX could be a public company today but isn't, and probably won't be for quite some time. Yeah. So from that perspective, if you can avoid being a public company, is the goal to avoid it? Absolutely.
What I've learned is if you have investors that believe in your company, SpaceX has found a way through a lot of different vehicles to allow private investors to get on their cap table through SPVs directly. And what I learned about being a public company is that it is enormously expensive and distracting, because your board, and your management team is focused on compliance. It's focused on controls. It's focused on proving compliance and controls and audits and publishing the financial statements perfectly on time so you don't have restatements. And it's not about running the business well. It's not, all of your focus gets turned on into reporting and controls and reporting on controls. And this is such a hard business, right? I think about this, a rocket business is like a rocket, right? Where it is almost impossible to invest enough capital to make the thing work and scale it. And therefore, any additional overhead is like mass on a rocket that is working against you. And you almost can't escape from Earth's gravity well if the Earth had the Earth was more dense or larger, we couldn't escape using chemical fuel, right? So I actually think that it might be impossible for a publicly traded company to develop a rocket system from scratch unless it had some other business supporting it. Now, knowing what I know now, didn't know that at the time. We saw all these rocket companies going public, right?
Right. Okay. So Rocket 4 will launch summer. That's a target, summer of 26.
Our target is summer 26, and working really hard to make that a successful flight.
Is there any milestones between now and then that we should be looking out for?
We're going to be testing the first stage engine. I think next week there's a campaign, and then we have throughout the summer there will be a lot of hot fire campaigns where we're testing our new avionics, our new combustion chamber. We're working on a stage test. The upper stage of Rocket 4 will be firing before the end of the year. And Katie will be making sure we're covering and releasing each of these milestones as they happen.
Great. Well, Chris, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for coming back. And we'll definitely be following the progress. So looking forward to seeing how things develop.
Awesome. Thanks, Mo. You're always welcome to come visit and see for yourself.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers.